Have you ever dared to imagine what they were forced to eat on slave plantations? What horrors were disguised as food? The deadliest weapon on the plantation didn't crack or bleed. It was served quietly, 3 times a day. Bowls of nothing, mouths that learned silence instead of nourishment. Hunger moved through the quarters like a shadow, watching, waiting, claiming the smallest bodies first. Every ration was a calculation. Every denied crumb a lesson in obedience. The air stank of despair and smoke, of children too weak to cry. Beneath those fields, the earth still remembers the taste of them. Blood-stained ledges from southern plantations reveal the horrifying truth. Owners spent twice as much feeding hunting hounds as they allocated for feeding enslaved infants. These weren't careless bookkeeping errors. They were calculated death warrants signed in ink and enforced with brutal efficiency. The evidence was systematically buried, until now. Medical studies from the 1850s documented enslaved children growing a staggering 10 centimeters shorter than their white counterparts. These same records expose plantation owners privately discussing these growth deficits as beneficial for creating a more manageable workforce. Physical weakness by design. Across the American South, 350 out of every 1,000 enslaved children perished before their first birthday, their small bodies surrendering not primarily to violence, but to the meticulously planned starvation campaign that no history textbook dares to fully acknowledge. But beneath this calculated cruelty lies an even more astonishing story of resistance. In the shadows of these death by hunger statistics, enslaved mothers created an underground food revolution that not only saved countless children, but birthed culinary traditions that would transform American cuisine forever. This is the story they never wanted you to know. The calculated hunger system. Starvation by spreadsheet. Somewhere, someone decided who would live and who would die, measuring fate in cups, weighing survival in ounces, as if life itself were a calculation. The plantation's hunger machine operated with mathematical efficiency that modern corporations would envy. Records reveal a system so precisely calibrated for maximum suffering that it could only be intentional. Standard weekly adult allocation: 3.5 pounds of salt pork and 1 peck of cornmeal. Children under 12 received half portions, with those under 6 given quarter rations. A formula for developmental destruction disguised as resource management. The quality of these rations tells an even more sinister story. Excavations at plantation sites uncovered food storage facilities where enslaved people received corn described in records as weevil-infested and unfit for market, deliberately providing food known to be compromised. The meat rations consisted primarily of fatback, the cheapest, least nutritious cut, while plantation smokehouses contained hams, shoulders, and better cuts reserved exclusively for white consumption. Formerly enslaved people documented the horrifying reality behind these clinical numbers. We were reduced to the wretched necessity of living at the expense of our neighbors. This we did by begging and stealing, whichever came handy. The plantation's official records never mention the desperate midnight foraging of starving children, but the evidence remains. The nurseries held darker secrets than any plantation dungeon. While mothers toiled through 14-hour days in distant fields, infants and young children were warehoused in crude structures that became death chambers. An 1842 account from Georgia describes 27 children under the supervision of one elderly woman with access to only corn gruel and occasional milk, a system designed to produce the acceptable losses coldly noted in plantation correspondence. Behind the sanitized language of maintenance costs and resource allocation in plantation ledgers lay a reality too horrifying for most historical accounts to acknowledge. But the evidence remains, waiting to be exposed. Before we continue exposing this hidden system of food oppression, if you believe these buried histories need to be told, subscribe to Black Stories Untold and help us spread awareness of the truth they've been hiding for centuries. Now, back to the video. Bodies shaped by hunger, the biological crime scene. Their bones tell the story that no overseer could whip in the silence. Every fracture, every mark a testament to pain endured, to lives defiant, even in the shadow of cruelty. The physical evidence of this mass starvation campaign lies preserved in grave after grave, a biological crime scene extending across generations. Archaeological excavations of slave cemeteries have unearthed skeletal remains bearing horizontal markings called growth arrest lines. Literal markers of starvation etched into bone that even death couldn't erase. Each line represents a period when a child's body shut down everything but basic survival. What the plantation owners never expected was that these bones would one day testify against them. Anthropological examination of remains from burial grounds revealed that 40% of the graves contained children whose bones recorded periods of starvation through decreased density and interrupted growth patterns. Scientific evidence of mass child malnutrition too clear to deny. The most damning evidence comes from the most unexpected source. Medical journals from the era, despite their pro-slavery views, documented how hookworm infections caused approximately 31% of height deficits in enslaved children. What they failed to acknowledge was how the plantation system deliberately created the perfect conditions for these parasites to thrive, turning slave quarters into biological weapons. These parasitic infections created a devastating cycle of malnutrition. Research into plantation medical records revealed that hookworms literally drained blood from children's intestines, causing severe anemia that prevented proper absorption of what little nutrition they received. This created a biological trap. Even when children managed to access food, their parasite-ravaged bodies couldn't properly utilize it. Dental records preserved from plantations show hypoplasia, permanent defects in tooth enamel that form during periods of severe nutritional stress. Studies of remains found that over 75% of enslaved children showed these dental markers of malnutrition, creating a permanent, physical record of childhood hunger that survived centuries. The plantation owners thought these physical markers of their cruelty would remain buried forever. They never imagined that science would eventually excavate their crimes, bringing their victims' suffering into the harsh light of modern analysis.
The profit calculation, the economics of child starvation. They worked out, with terrifying accuracy, the precise point at which a child could be starved to the edge of death, always balancing cruelty against profit, as if life itself were just a ledger entry. The ledger books tell a story more horrifying than any overseer's whipping post. Plantation accounting records from 1857 contain figures that should haunt American history. Annual food expenditure per slave child, ages 0 through 10, $9.76. Compared to annual value increase of slave child, approximately $50 to $100. This wasn't just cruel negligence. Every act of starvation served a cold business strategy, with returns calculated in human suffering. The economic machinery behind plantation child starvation operated with chilling sophistication. Food represented the highest maintenance cost for enslaved people across all plantation records, higher than clothing, shelter, and medical care combined. Plantation papers contain letters exposing the true nature of this system, discussing strategies to reduce the considerable expense of feeding the Negro stock by cutting rations to the minimum required for productive capacity. What happened when plantation owners discovered they could increase profits by systematically malnourishing children? Records reveal the terrifying answer. Documents show a deliberate switch from varied provisions to the minimal corn pork standard in 1845, noting a 23% reduction in food costs while acknowledging some initial decline in worker strength that was deemed acceptable, a euphemism for children dying at profitable rates. Medical records from plantation physicians reveal disturbing professional negligence. Journal entries acknowledge the general poor condition of Negro children in their early years, while attributing it to natural weakness of the African constitution, rather than the starvation conditions being witnessed. The material abundance surrounding starving children adds another layer of calculated cruelty to this economic horror. While plantation kitchens prepared lavish European-inspired feasts, enslaved children received what one Virginia narrative described as nothing but a little cornmeal soup, poured in a trough, and eat it like the pigs. Scarcity alone cannot explain this. Hunger takes shape as a deliberate strategy, imposed where abundance exists. The resistance, the underground food rebellion. While plantation owners obsessed over their profits, enslaved mothers quietly waged the rebellion of survival, a food resistance that no chain, no whip, no ledger could ever fully contain, a movement that would endure long after the plantations fell silent. The plantation records document an unexpected problem. Enslaved people refused to let their children starve quietly. Between the clinical lines of punishment logs lies evidence of a sophisticated underground food rebellion. Plantation journals record the brutal whipping of an enslaved cook caught hiding cornbread in her clothing. One soldier in an unacknowledged army of mothers fighting a shadow war for their children's survival. What plantation owners dismissed as theft was actually a complex resistance network spanning generations. Narratives describe mothers saving bones from plantation kitchens, cracking them open to access marrow, then boiling them repeatedly to extract calcium for their children's development, turning garbage into life-saving nutrition through knowledge passed down in whispers. The most damning evidence against the plantation hunger system lies buried beneath former slave cabins. Archaeological excavations uncovered hidden storage pits containing fish bones and wild plant remains beneath floorboards. Physical proof of an extensive underground food economy operating right under the overseer's feet. Each recovered bone fragment represents an act of rebellion against a system designed to starve children into submission. The resistance took forms that plantation owners never anticipated. Extended breastfeeding became biological warfare against the starvation system. Plantation birth records note with disapproval that Negro women persist in nursing children to 2 years and beyond, despite being told to wean earlier, a practice that provided crucial nutrition and immunity to vulnerable children while reducing their dependence on the master's inadequate rations. This shadow war for survival created warriors out of mothers and children alike. The evidence of their resistance remains hidden in plain sight on dinner tables across America. From hunger to heritage, turning starvation into sustenance. What was meant to punish became a spark of defiance. Food, intended as a tool of domination, was quietly repurposed into the blueprint for a culinary rebellion, passed in whispers from one mother to the next. The desperate cooking techniques born on plantations didn't just save lives, they transformed American cuisine forever. What began as survival necessity evolved into culinary genius that would outlast the plantation system itself. Slow cooking methods developed for tough, unwanted cuts of meat became the foundation for dishes now served in high-end restaurants. Their origins in starvation resistance systematically erased from culinary history. The secrets hiding in plain sight on modern plates tell a story of resistance never fully acknowledged. One-pot cooking, born when enslaved people had access to only a single cooking vessel, evolved into sophisticated layering techniques that modern nutritionists now recognize as preserving nutrients that conventional cooking methods destroy. Each soul food technique represents a battlefield strategy in the war against hunger. The most remarkable revolution happened in plain sight: the transformation of garbage into gourmet. Plantation records from Virginia document owners puzzling over why enslaved people collected pig intestines, feet, and ears, parts now recognized as rich in essential proteins and minerals when properly prepared. What slave owners saw as bizarre behavior was actually nutritional science being practiced by people fighting to keep their children alive. The geographical patterns of modern food inequity exposed the plantation system's lingering shadow. USDA research reveals that 60% of counties with the highest food insecurity rates today fall within former plantation regions, creating a direct line between historical starvation practices and contemporary food apartheid. The plantation never truly ended, it just evolved. What started as desperate survival tactics has become something the plantation owners never could have imagined: a celebrated cuisine that carries the coded knowledge of resistance in every recipe. The very foods meant to break enslaved bodies now nourish a cultural identity that refused to be starved out of existence. The revolution on the plate, from survival to celebration. As we trace the incredible legacy of survival and ingenuity, one thing becomes clear. Food was never just sustenance. It was resistance. What began as stolen scraps, hidden bites, snatched in defiance, grew into a cuisine so rich, so daring, that it didn't just feed the oppressed. It transformed the very soul of America. The final victory of enslaved mothers lies not just in the children they managed to save, but in how their desperate innovations fundamentally altered American culture. Techniques for transforming tough, discarded cuts of meat into tender, flavorful dishes have been adopted into mainstream cooking, often without acknowledgement of their origins in Black survival, a culinary appropriation that continues to this day. Soul food stands as both cultural triumph and historical testimony, evidence too delicious to destroy. Dishes like collard greens with ham hocks testify to both the horrors of a system that provided only scraps and the brilliance that transformed those scraps into nutrition. Every bite carries a history more complex than most Americans are prepared to digest. The revolution continues through the work of contemporary Black chefs who have dedicated their careers to reclaiming these food histories as stories of ancestral genius rather than mere victimhood. Through historical cooking demonstrations and research, they're exposing the sophisticated nutritional science embedded in recipes developed during slavery, knowledge that Western nutrition is only now beginning to understand. Today's food justice activists represent the modern front in a war that began on plantations. By fighting for equitable food access in underserved communities, they continue the underground food networks that once meant survival. As one activist notes, growing food has always been an act of resistance for Black people in America, a resistance that spans from hidden plantation gardens to modern urban farming initiatives. Every Sunday dinner table laden with these foods represents not just a meal, but a living monument to those who refuse to let their children starve under a system designed to break their bodies and spirits. They transformed hunger into heritage, deprivation into delicious defiance. That's not just resilience, it's revolution on a plate. What you just learned is only the tip of the iceberg. Watch the next video to uncover more untold stories of survival, resistance, and the truths they tried to bury. Because the legacy of resilience doesn't end here.